Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, July 31st. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast on this last day of July. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and try to read between the lines so you don't have to. When we last left you on yesterday's podcast, we had just gotten word of that earthquake with the tsunami warning overnight, Jill.
Yes, as we updated the podcast late on Tuesday night, it was not clear what the actual impact in terms of tsunamis would be. There had been alerts for as far away as the west coast of the United States, from Washington to California. And thankfully, it looks like the worst case scenario was averted.
Yes, in many cases, we saw like 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot tsunamis. But bear in mind, for those of you who are just like, oh, I would have, happily hung out in the water there. What was the concern about? We should note that a 3 foot tsunami is very different than a 3 foot wave, both in speed, but also how much water it moves. That a 3 foot wave, you can splash around on the beach. A 3 foot tsunami, that can move enough water to, push cars different directions. So one of the reasons why they were so cautious overnight on Tuesday, warning basically everyone surrounding the Pacific Ocean. So we're talking from Alaska to Canada to South America to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China. We're all very much warning about this. Keep in mind that earthquake that happened off the coast of Russia there, off of Kamchatka, the peninsula there, the sixth strongest earthquake ever recorded on Earth. That's how powerful this quake was. And it also moved in a way that moved water that led to tsunami. There's different types of earthquakes. This is the one where basically the ocean floor moves in a way that creates tsunamis. So everyone breathing a sigh of relief there. There's a lot of concern, particularly in Hawaii. Jill, we shared some of those videos of people evacuating the higher elevations due to those concerns, including a number of members of the Mo News audience who were sharing pictures with us as they were being evacuated.
As I was looking at the warnings and the projected time that the tsunamis could potentially hit certain areas, the one silver lining was that at least it was still when people were up. This didn't happen when everyone was sleeping. People were able to evacuate low-lying areas.
Yeah, and the ocean is a big place. And so even though tsunamis move at about 500 miles per hour, it was taking hours for the tsunami to make its way across the ocean, so there was time to get out. And then, Jill, in South America, they were still dealing with warnings as of Wednesday afternoon, given, again, how
is this thing here yet? What's going on?
How long is this
Did it get stuck in traffic? Where is it?
Rare situation, by the way, took place in the Pacific, Jill. Tsunami passing under a hurricane there in the Pacific. That's a rare situation. But for those of you asking about being out at sea, that's where a tsunami you don't feel as much because, again, the ocean is deep there. It's when the tsunami starts to make its way into shallow areas towards land. That's where you start to see the rise of a tsunami.
And we could joke because I said the worst case scenario did not play out.
Correct.
Okay, let's get to some other headlines, starting with the economy. The Federal Reserve did not cut interest rates at its latest meeting, despite a ton of public pressure from President Trump. So what is it going to take to get a rate cut?
Yes, and we will look at some of the new data that came out yesterday in regards to economic growth here in the U.S. as we await Trump's big tariff deadline tomorrow.
To the Middle East, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff heads to the region, wanting a closer look at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And for the first time, the entire Arab League urging Hamas to disarm.
Yeah, 22 Muslim and Arab states coming out against them, and also for the first time condemning the October 7th attacks. We'll tell you what it might mean for the future of the region as Canada now follows the UK and France's lead in recognizing Palestine.
To politics, Kamala Harris says she is not running for California governor. So what could be next for the former Veep?
Will she make a third attempt at the White House, Jill?
A bill to ban stock trading amongst lawmakers passes a key committee. Why the White House not on board? In business news, we're getting a look at Amazon's deal with the New York Times over AI.
The future of how you might be getting your news and information.
And Starbucks adjusting its menu, some say for Maha. We'll explain. And Moshe, I've been asking for a Forbes 50 over 50 or 60 over 60 list for a while. And it turns out they recently launched one of those lists. So we'll take a look at who's on it for 2025. Also, those powerhouse women doling out some advice that they would give to their younger selves. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, one of the remarkable things about the American Revolution was just how young some of these founders were. We'll tell you about a 19-year-old, you'll recognize the name, who became a major general in the U.S. Continental Army today.
All right, the Federal Reserve held interest rates steady as it wrapped up its policy meeting on Wednesday for a fifth meeting in a row. This was mostly as expected. The federal funds rate will continue to be set in a range between 4.25% to 4.5%. And it comes despite a lot of pressure from President Trump to lower rates. We've reported he has called the chairman too late, Powell. He's also called him a total moron. So why does Trump want the Fed to lower rates? Mostly because he thinks it can boost the economy and that will make it easier for businesses and consumers to borrow money. But the Fed is an independent body. And so we saw today that the majority of governors felt that it just was not the right time for another cut. There was a rare division, though. 2 members of the powerful Board of Governors dissented. So 2 of those members, Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, they wanted the Fed to lower interest rates by about 0.25 percentage point. Why this is noteworthy, the last time 2 board members opposed a decision like this was in 1993 when Alan Greenspan was the chair. Powell, at his press conference afterward, downplaying the division, saying that everyone is really thinking carefully about their positions. So that would make this vote 9-2. Powell also saying that he thinks the economy has moderated in the first half of the year. He said the Fed has 2 goals when it figures out the borrowing rate. It wants maximum employment and stable prices. So when it comes to employment, Powell says the job market is solid. The unemployment rate's still low, about 4.1%. But when it comes to inflation and prices, he says they're still above the target of about 2%. So that is why Powell and some of the other members there wanting to wait a bit longer. They want to see how President Trump's tariffs will impact the economy and prices. The next meeting is in September, and Powell says he's going to let the data determine whether or not they'll cut rates. We'll get the latest jobs numbers tomorrow when the report for July comes out. And Moshe, all of this came after we got pretty good GDP numbers earlier on Wednesday, but always important, as we say, to read between the lines.
Yeah, and this is very complicated when it comes to the economy. So many factors here, so much uncertainty, especially related to tariffs right now. But overall in Q2, the second quarter, which runs from April to June, the Commerce Department says that GDP, which is economic growth in the country, jumped 3%. That is beyond what economists were expecting. That is up sharply from being down 0.5% in the first quarter of the year. Now, some economists say you should look at the whole half of the year, so average the 2 together. And so they see slight growth, but not growth that they would be expecting to see if we hadn't been going through all these tariff headlines right now. There's also questions as to growth and the impact of the fact that we're importing less items on GDP and the fact that a lot of companies anticipating some of these tariffs really stocked up on things in the first quarter. So in many cases, some economists are saying, we still are TBD on the third quarter, still TBD on the fourth quarter. That reinforces that decision that you saw from the Fed that you just talked about there, Jill, that 9 out of 11 of them who voted yesterday say, it's not quite time to lower interest rates. We're still a little nervous about how things may roll here because you saw this crazy import surge January through March and then plummeting April through June. There's just a lot to take in right now. And they're slow rolling things because they think about the long term of the economy. But it's frustrating. Trump, he put out a partially all caps social media post early on Wednesday morning when these numbers came out saying second quarter GDP just out 3%, way better than expected, exclamation point, too late, must now lower the rate. He doesn't even use his name anymore. He just calls him too late. He's not even Powell. He's just too late. He called him, quote unquote, too late, must now lower the rate. It rhymes. You get it? Late, rate. No inflation, exclamation point. Let people buy and refinance their homes, exclamation point. That latter point, Jill, certainly something that's come up, certainly in conversations that I've had with friends and family who are just like, the rates are so high. I have no interest in selling a house to have to go buy a new house. The rates are above 6. And of course, there is an impact. The Fed lowering the overall Fed rate would have an impact on the 30-year mortgage rate here. Speaking of homes, Powell did take a question about the housing market. Again, those mortgage rates that are in the 6s, even 7%. He didn't try to take too much responsibility there, even though there is a sort of, slight connection there between the Fed rate and 30-year mortgage rates. But he did blame the current affordability crisis on too few affordable houses on the market. The U.S., even as we've been seeing this now play out for a number of years, is just not building enough homes. Not enough homes, not enough supply, same demand or increasing demand. Well, rates go up and prices go up. So that's a huge thing. Certainly, that's not true everywhere in the country. In certain places, they've built too much inventory. For example, if you live in Florida and places like Tampa or South Florida, they built a lot. In other places, much harder to build, like New York City. Impossible to build. It was actually one of the themes I talked about with Andrew Cuomo on the podcast we put out yesterday, being like, why is it so hard to do stuff here? And he's like, we're just not thinking creatively enough. But there are, a lot of complaints about regulations in blue states and blue cities. Jill, one positive point when we talk about all these economic numbers, consumer spending, which powers about 70% of the U.S. economy, that picked up sharply in the second quarter. So it appears, folks, that we continue to spend here. I don't know how much of it is on our credit cards. We'll have to get that data versus money that we do currently have in our pockets. But people are spending despite these tariff headlines. And some of that might, again, be anticipating that prices may be going up here with these tariffs in the coming months. And so a lot to take in here. Bottom line, economy appears to be doing well. But when you look under the hood, still concern. And that's what economists do. They try to look at all the parts and all the moving parts and try to make predictions and, probabilities. And so right now, things look okay, but they're still crossing their fingers, a little nervous about how the back half of the year could go.
Okay, now to the situation in the Middle East, where Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff headed back to the region for the first time in 3 months. Axios reporting he'll be focused on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It comes amid a stalemate in the Gaza ceasefire and hostage talks. It's possible that Witkoff may travel to Gaza to visit the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or GHF aid centers. Officials say the president wants to know more about what the humanitarian situation is like on the ground in order to know how to get more help to the civilians there. Witkoff also expected to talk to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the big picture and what his plans are for Gaza and how to get to a ceasefire deal. Now, this comes even though the United States and Israel walked away from negotiations last week, saying that Hamas was simply not serious. They were extremely frustrated with new demands that Hamas put on those talks. Israel now saying they've sent comments back to Hamas through Qatar and Egyptian mediators about Hamas's response to the ceasefire proposal, although Israel reportedly not optimistic.
Yeah, a reminder here, there's a fundamental issue that's happening here between the Israelis and Hamas. On Hamas's side, they would like to remain in power and have a role in the future. As far as the Israelis are concerned, if this war is to end completely, Hamas disarms, goes away, and doesn't exist anymore. And so that's a fundamental issue there, and that's led to these delays over and over and over and over again. Also, key issue, Israel not certain that it wants to relinquish all control of Gaza moving forward, including that southern border there of Gaza that borders Egypt, that includes the city of Rafah. So right now, Israel and the U.S. exploring alternatives here, saying, Hamas continues to make these demands as to how much they want in exchange for hostages. There are certainly a number of Israelis who are just like, give Hamas what it wants at this point. But again, the key thing is what happens next, because Hamas wants the war to end and they want to remain there. Now, the Israeli cabinet has been discussing in recent days the possibility of escalating the war in Gaza and then even annexing parts of Gaza permanently as a leverage point against Hamas, saying, listen, Hamas, you don't make a deal here. We will start taking more and more territory permanently away from the Gaza Strip, which, by the way, is not that big to begin with. We're talking about a effectively 8-mile by 25-mile strip of land, about the size of the city of Philadelphia, for about just over 2 million people who live there. Now, the White House doesn't seem to have an appetite for the Israeli proposal of annexing Gaza. They're looking for an end to fighting. And remember, this all comes as there's increasing pressure and frustration with the Israeli government in terms of its conduct there in Gaza, how long the war has lasted, the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding there. Jill, as we began taping this podcast, we learned that the Canadian government, the latest G7 country to say they will recognize a Palestinian state, that comes after France's announcement last week, the UK's announcement that they're looking to do it in September if Israel doesn't end the war. The Canadians, in their announcement, put some conditions on this. They say this comes because of their frustration of what is happening there in Gaza, also how Israel is continuing to expand settlements and towns in the West Bank, the territory that the Palestinians see as their land for a future state. But the Canadians also saying that this recognition is also predicated on the Palestinian Authority having its first election in 20 years. Jill, they haven't had an election since 2006 because, again, when they look around there, they see that if they actually have an election, Hamas might win or will win. And one of the other preconditions here for the Canadians is that there will be no Hamas involvement in this future Palestinian state.
And on that note, another development: for the first time, the 22 member countries of the Arab League joined an agreement with the EU and 17 other countries at a UN conference on Tuesday, where they publicly condemned Hamas for the October 7th massacre and also called for Hamas to disarm. So they signed a declaration during a UN conference, which is calling for a two-state solution, an Israel and a Palestine. And that declaration said Hamas must release the hostages, end its rule in Gaza, and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority government. The declaration also called for the creation of a demilitarized Palestinian state, uniting the West Bank and Gaza along the borders that existed before the 1967 Arab-Israeli War.
This is a pretty big deal. The Arab League, all 22 countries, anything that passed the Arab League always has to get unanimous support. They can't have one dissenter. And they formed decades ago. And their goal very early on was to destroy Israel. They attempted it many, many times. In the 60s, they passed a principle that said no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no normalization with Israel. Now, of course, that has changed over time. Egypt has a peace treaty. Jordan has a peace treaty. The Israelis have recognition and deals with UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan. So more and more over time, that has shifted. But the fact that you have the Arab League here condemning Hamas and saying you guys are out shows basically A, how weak Hamas has gotten, B, how weak Iran has gotten, C, how frustrated the Arab world has gotten with Hamas, and the fact that they were pretty close to a major deal pre-October 7th. That was one of the reasons that Hamas launched the war on October 7th, was that the Saudis were negotiating with the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis and the Americans for like a major deal that basically would be a breakthrough deal between Saudi and Israel and effectively cut Hamas out. And so Hamas decided, no, now is the time for us to do something big. And so this is one of the things that I think continues to frustrate folks, is that the Palestinian Authority remains corrupt and weak, has like a 90% disapproval rating, has major issues. Their leader, Abbas, is in his late 80s. It's not clear who will replace him and whether the Palestinian people will want that replacement. But you do start to see this groundswell happening. In just the past week, it's pretty remarkable. The European countries recognizing a Palestinian state, the Arab League condemning Hamas, this major summit for a two-state solution, this condemnation of Israel, and this diplomatic isolation for the Israelis. A lot of things moving here right now, Jill. We always talk about that, there's decades where nothing happens, and there's days or weeks where decades happen. And just watching what has unfolded here since October 7th, we're not even 2 years removed, a pretty remarkable thing. And it's still trying to get our head around. I mean, we'll have perspective on this 10 years from now, but watching this sort of unfold day by day, big things are happening here. And how, the next chess move, the next pieces, we'll be closely watching to, see what happens next.
Time for the speed read, starting with politics from the Los Angeles Times. After months of speculation about her political future, former Vice President Kamala Harris has ruled out one option, governor of California. She said Wednesday that she will not be entering the 2026 race to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, who is serving his second term and cannot run again. Harris didn't say what she plans to do next, but her choice is the clearest sign yet that perhaps she is considering a third run for president. She said in a statement, quote, "I love this state, its people, and its promise. It's my home. But after deep reflection, I've decided I will not run for governor in this election. For now, my leadership and public service will not be in elected office. I look forward to getting back out and listening to the American people, helping elect Democrats across the nation who will fight fearlessly, and sharing more details in the months ahead about my own plans."
Yeah, so the bottom line here, Kamala Harris didn't want to be governor. She's been attorney general. She's been a U.S. senator. She's been vice president. She ran for president in 2020. She ran for president again in 2024, was the nominee, right? And so this was available to her. But the people around her say, her gut wasn't in it. She didn't want to govern as the governor of California. She could have done it, but her last time she held state office there as attorney general was about a decade ago. And she's holding out for higher ambition, and she's trying to figure out what exactly she wants to do next after being vice president, and whether she wants to make what would be her third run for the presidency, right? 2020 in the primary, 2024, kind of being thrown in there in the final 100 days by Joe Biden. Does she run in 2028 in what will be an open race for both Republicans and Democrats? TBD. In the meantime, she's writing a book. She's got a nonprofit. So she's trying to figure out if there's ways that she can be involved sort of independently here. You know, she would have been the big fish in this pond of so many candidates in California. Some of the other names being thrown about are very local names, unless some sort of celebrity or somebody gets in the race at this juncture. It does free things up for Democrats in California, which is a pretty blue state, right? Minus that election of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Republican, a while back. And of course, you can go back to Ronald Reagan and stuff. Ultimately, it's been a pretty blue state for the past 2 decades. So we'll see what happens there. And we'll see what happens with Harris. When you look at very early polling, Jill, polling doesn't really matter right now. She does have the name recognition. So about 20 to 25% of Democrats say, I'd like Kamala Harris. But it's still, the year 2025. No one's going to be serious about this till 2027. So there's still a couple of years here between now and then. And she apparently, is keeping that option open.
All right, now to another story that we've been staying on top of here on the podcast. This from Politico. A Senate committee voted to advance a bill that would ban stock trading by lawmakers, also presidents and vice presidents. And that bill advanced despite objections from most Republicans and with a carve out for President Trump. Republican Missouri Senator Josh Hawley introduced that original bill barring members of Congress and their spouses from trading stocks. And it was named, much to Democrats' dismay, for Representative Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat from California. She has come under scrutiny for her husband's extensive trading without evidence that any of it was done using insider information from Capitol Hill.
Though, Jill, she does crush it when you look at their returns. She is among the members of Congress who does extremely well in the stock market.
Yeah, it makes me want to say, I'll just have what she's having. Can I do those trades?
I'll take all the Senate reports and committee hearings and briefings and trade off of that.
So in conjunction with Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, who is the top Democrat on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Hawley offered an alternative to the panel that would ditch the contentious name and also expand the prohibitions to the president and vice president, but notably for future administrations, meaning that President Trump would not be impacted by this.
Yeah, only future presidents and vice presidents wouldn't be able to trade stock. They made that special exception for the current president and vice president. And this is made for a very contentious situation on Capitol Hill, Jill, with Republicans arguing with each other, Trump coming out against Hawley with various social media statements saying that, he's doing the Democrats' dirty work with this legislation, even though when you look back at it, this is something that the White House had supported at one point, which is a ban on stock trading. They've been very critical, particularly, again, of Nancy Pelosi and some others. By the way, it runs the gamut of Republicans and Democrats who do extremely well in the stock market as members of Congress, and there's no ban on that. And ethically speaking, that creates major issues. So the committee here over in the Senate voted 8-7, with all Republicans on the panel except for Hawley voting against proceeding with the bill here. The GOP critics argued it would unfairly punish the wealthy and disincentivize some from serving in Congress, which is sort of the point, at least the first thing, which is like people feel like there's an unfair advantage to being in Congress. But then again, there has not been a pay raise for members of Congress going back more than a decade. So there has been a push, like, what are some other things we can do to make it rewarding financially and otherwise to be a member of Congress? And so there are some within Congress who argue, the ability to make money in the stock market is something they have while their salary is in the low 100,000s, and they still have to support a family in their home district, as well as find a place to sleep in Washington. Some members of Congress actually sleep in their offices. Some share houses with each other, like they're fraternity or sorority. And so one of the things we're watching here, ultimately, Jill, will this end up getting a vote? Especially given how critical the president has been here and how deferential Republicans typically are to President Trump. And that's something we'll be watching here. But as of right now, as of today, if you're a member of Congress, trade away.
From the Wall Street Journal, we're learning the financial terms of that deal struck a couple of months ago between Amazon and the New York Times. Amazon is going to be licensing news and cooking content from the Times for about $20 million to $25 million a year. Amazon looking to use Times content to train its AI platforms and feature summaries and short excerpts of Times content in its products and services. That includes Alexa. The companies announced their deal in May. It also gives Amazon access to content from the New York Times sports property, The Athletic. The financial terms of the multi-year deal offer a window into how publishers and artificial intelligence companies are valuing news content in the midst of a seismic change in how we all seek information online.
Right now, in a number of places, you're seeing the rise in the popularity of the AI chatbots upending traditional search traffic. And many publishers have depended on that, right? When you search for something, typically in Google, you then might click on a news article to read more about it. Well, with companies like Google and others really doubling down on AI, especially if you've noticed recently, you search something in Google, you get an AI answer. You're probably less likely to then go ahead and click further into a news article. So this is the New York Times looking into the future here, realizing that search engine optimization and search traffic will continue to go down here. So trying to find a new revenue stream and trying to strike a deal here. Remember, the Times is suing OpenAI over their use of content. And so they're hoping to strike these licensing deals. And we've seen this increasingly. OpenAI, which created ChatGPT, they have a deal with the Wall Street Journal allegedly for $250 million over 5 years. OpenAI also has a deal with the owner of Politico and Business Insider worth about $25 to $30 million. So, we're seeing this in more and more places. Jill, really the future, even here at Mo News, in the coming years, we'll be figuring out how we can customize news for all of you and utilize AI, for example, in this podcast. I know most of you want to listen to the entire thing, but some of you might only be interested in a few stories. And some of you may not be interested in some of the things we bring you. And according to some of your reviews, some of you love our chit chat and some of you don't like our chit chat. We got a 1-star review recently, Jill. I don't know who this guy is, but yeah, I was just like, we have 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. And then obviously my eye goes to the negative, the 1-star review.
What did the person say?
Motion, Jill, too much chit chat.
Can they just get to the news already?
Can they just get the news? They have too many opinions. Anyway, well, you're clearly that person not listening anymore after that 1-star. But you took the time to give us a 1-star review. Who are you, man? Anyway, the point of all of this is, in the future, based on AI, you might get delivered. Here are the 4 stories from the podcast that, you really like, and the 3 stories from the Instagram, and the piece of the newsletter that you might like. And that customization will continue, to be the focus of many organizations. So you're going to continue to see that one of the reasons we wanted to do this in the podcast today is these tie-ups you're going to be seeing between AI and news publishers and, frankly, all types of content moving forward.
Back to that review. I thought I asked only for good reviews. I'm stuck on it.
The last 20 reviews, 19 of them have been 5 stars. One of them was a 1-star. So.
All right. I have thick skin. All right, from Yahoo News, Starbucks, which built a loyal following in part by selling sugary, candy-colored drinks, has a vision for a healthier menu that is better suited for the Maha era, or Make America Healthy Again. So Starbucks now testing matcha and cold brew made with coconut water, syrups sweetened with agave instead of sugar. They've been piloting a protein-infused cold foam and also looking into more plant-based products. The moves are meant to draw in the health and wellness crowd, part of a broader menu overhaul designed to bring more traffic to stores and reverse a sales slump. The menu revamp is just one element of that turnaround plan put in place by Chief Executive Officer Brian Niccol. It has yet to bear fruit, though. There's also been a big push for sugar reduction. This week, Starbucks started to test coconut water-based beverages at 5 stores in the New York area.
So these drinks have about a third of the sugar content of some of their other drinks, though, Jill, this is Starbucks. They are known for their frappuccinos and other very sugar-laden drinks as well. They're trying to walk a fine line here. Interestingly, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary, recently put a spotlight on the company when he said that the CEO of Starbucks had pledged that Starbucks would further Maha on its menu. But Starbucks here and their focus on healthier options does predate the Trump administration. The company removed ingredients like high fructose corn syrup, as well as artificial dyes and flavors several years ago, before it was so in vogue these days.
And finally from Forbes, Forbes out with its 5th annual 50 over 50 list in partnership with the Know Your Value initiative. They're spotlighting women who have defied the notion that success has an age limit. The list featuring actress Halle Berry, she is 58, NASA astronaut Sunita Williams, she's 59, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, she's 68, journalist Maria Shriver, who's 69, and biotech founder Suma Krishnan, she is 60. Also investor Frida Kapoor Klein, who is 70. The honorees across fields have achieved some of their most significant accomplishments after turning 50, challenging traditional ideas about aging. The 4 categories include impact, innovation, investment, and lifestyle. And Moshe, as Forbes points out, with age comes wisdom. So they asked the women, knowing what they know now, what would they tell their younger selves? And some of the answers are great.
Yeah, here is a selection here. This is Lisa Sunin. She's 59. She's the managing partner of American Heart Association Ventures. She says, when it comes to what would they tell their younger selves, always take the job where you like the people. In the end, there is no clear career path. Only great people along a path that reveals itself along the way. Vicky Sato, 77. She's the chair of Ver Biotechnology. She says, learn languages, at least one modern and useful one. It broadens one's worldview. Jen Zezut, she's the 53-year-old co-founder and CEO of Goodles. She says she would tell her younger self, your kiddos are going to turn out okay. Working so hard while they are little and missing so many field trips and school plays is not messing them up for life. All 3 kids will grow up striving to find some kind of work or life purpose that fills them with as much joy and passion as they saw their mom bring to her work. In fact, one is going to follow your footsteps and start a bunch of little companies all before the age of 20.
I love that one because I think it really does speak to a lot of the guilt that working moms in particular have every time they miss something or feel like they're not spending enough time with their kids.
And you get some Instagram reel telling you that, like, you know, you're terrible.
Never do this. As a psychiatrist,
3 things I would never do to my child.
Do not ever miss a field trip.
All right, one more piece of advice. This is from Victoria Coleman, 65, CEO of Agave. She tells her younger self, party more. I've probably only been to one real party. And pick your bets.
Moshe, a little fun, too.
Hey, listen, I tell the kids in college, I tell our interns, Jill and Mo News, I was like, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself.
You never have it this good.
You will never. Like, and when people tell you that in college, like, I don't think you get it. But now as an adult, you get it. You're like, that just like freedom that you have. Like, I mean, don't go too crazy, kids, but like, enjoy yourself. All right. On this day in history, we begin in 1777. A 19-year-old French aristocrat, full name, Marie-Joseph Paul Roch Yves Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette. You recognize? He mainly went by that last.
I recognize the last 3 syllables. That's it.
So, yes, Marquis de Lafayette. We just know him as Lafayette. There's statues to him in various American cities, including D.C. Well, on this day, he was a 19-year-old. He accepts a commission to be a major general in the Continental Army. We were looking for just, recruits.
Anyone.
To go up against the Brits. Anybody. In fact, he took the major general job with no pay from George Washington, helps the U.S. to victory in a number of battles, is considered a hero here, then goes back to France to help them with their revolution. He was trying to find a middle path there, but some of the extremists, as part of the revolution there, actually ran him out of France. He escaped. He was eventually imprisoned for a few years. Napoleon had to free him. He then, does a number of roles in the French government through the early 1800s. At one point, Jill, he is offered to be the dictator of France. That's how much the French love him, too. He's like, I'm not, that's not my deal. I'm not going to be a dictator. We're all about democracy here. I'm Lafayette. Anyway, the point is, Lafayette, 19 years old, becomes a major general in the U.S. Army on this day in history. Fast forward to the 20th century, on this day in 1971, you might remember those images of them driving a car on the moon. I mean, only humans would come up with that, right? Like, let's build a car that we can drive around on the moon. On this day, the Apollo 15 astronauts, James Irwin and David Scott, used the first four-wheeled battery-powered lunar roving vehicle to drive around the moon's surface. Another piece of technology that counts July 31st as its birthday, the Game Boy, Nintendo Game Boy, released in the U.S. on this day in 1989. So happy 36th birthday to the Game Boy.
My thumbs hurt just thinking about it.
The Game Boy, playing Tetris on the Game Boy with that little like up-down button. Kids, You don't know.
You
how
haven't
good you have it
lived.
these days. You haven't lived. Gen X and millennials, we're all going to have carpal tunnel in our 40s. And then we end here, as always, with a bit of music history on this date in 1971, July 31st, 1971, 54 years ago today. You've Got a Friend by James Taylor reaches #1 on the Billboard charts, not to be confused with You've Got a Friend by Carole King. She wrote the song. They had a close relationship. In fact, according to James Taylor, Carole King told him that the song You've Got a Friend was actually a response to a line in his previous song, Fire and Rain. In Fire and Rain, he has a line that says, I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend.
I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. Okay, I have such a bad voice, but I think without singing it, it just we didn't do it justice. Sorry.
Right. Me stating it as prose.
I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend.
When I could not find a friend. And so she wrote in response, You've Got a Friend. Anyway, so she wrote You've Got a Friend. She recorded it. Then Taylor recorded it. And so you can choose, listeners, today which version you like better. But on this day, Taylor's version went to #1. And we end here with another piece of music history on this day in 1999. Turning 26 years old today, Jill, Genie in a Bottle reaches #1 on the Billboard charts by Christina Aguilera.
All right, everyone, you definitely have a friend in me and Moshe.
Yeah, you don't have friends who can sing, but you have friends.
That's not a requirement. I don't know anybody who's like,
I really need like a friend with perfect pitch.
Although it is fun to have a friend who's a great singer and can rock out at karaoke, but we'll be your friend regardless. Anyway, thank you all for listening. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Good reviews, again.
Only the good reviews. How do you have time to, like, if you decide you don't like this podcast anymore, just why you gotta hate? Why you gotta hate publicly? You can send us a note. You can give us feedback. Jill and I will take it. Jill, by the way, we're like totally not incorporating this person's feedback. They thought there was too much small talk.
And we're doubling down.
Yeah, because this person has left us. And they've already left us the one side. They can't leave any more reviews. So, whatever. You done. Whatever. We're moving on. Tomorrow's August, Jill. I'll see you in August.
See you next month.
Thanks for listening to the Murrow News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.